An annual survey done last year by the American Psychological Association determined that 8 out of 10 adults felt that the recent pandemic was a significant source of stress on their lives. Pretty obvious. More than that, so more than half of those that were surveyed said that they felt overwhelmed by the amount of uncertainty that's now prevalent in our society nowadays. And, you know, all generations have been affected by that uncertainty. The most affected, however, are the Gen Z, up to 67% of which felt overwhelmed about their future. So for those of you who don't know, Gen Z are our youngest working population. They're the ones who were born between 1997 to around 2010. Right? My eldest son is a part of that generation. And that uncertainty can oftentimes lead to certain decisions and behaviors that they regret, or that they lose control over, or worst of all, becomes destructive to themselves or to other people. Uncertainty, everybody struggles with uncertainty, and the gut reaction to that is, we try to exert our control over it. We hold it tight in our fist. But what if we didn't need to? What if we had a rudder or a sail that allowed us to keep going in the direction we chose to go, no matter where the wind blew? Growing up in the Philippines, I didn't have a lot of uncertainty that was sort of laid down, in my path. I come from a long line of health professionals. My parents were doctors. All of their many of their friends were doctors too, and a huge part of my family are all in the health profession. So, as the eldest of 3 kids, I kind of knew where I was headed. I didn't need a lot of convincing. So I made my decisions accordingly. I chose to, focus on the stuff that I was good at, science, medicine, and I put aside the things that I really love to do: history, creative arts, writing, playing football even. But something always felt missing. Almost like an ingredient in a stew that you can't quite put your finger on. But I was on a certain path. It was certain, it was stable, so I kept going. And then, of course, like most movie plot lines tend to go, I hit a roadblock, literally and figuratively. My first real dose of uncertainty. In 2002, a few months before I graduated from college, I was street racing with a few friends down an unfamiliar road. And all of a sudden, there was like a turn, like, oh my gosh. And I took the turn at 140 kilometers per hour. I see many of your faces. Big mistake, right? And I ended up drifting to the opposite lane, right into the path of an 18-wheeler truck, which I hit with my tiny Corolla. Bam. I'll leave it to your imagination what happened. But thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt. And as for me, all I came away with, miraculously, were a few lacerations, maybe a concussion, and a compound fracture of my right femur, for which I now have a metal rod in my leg. I know what many of you are thinking, or some of you are thinking, and the answer is no, I don't beep in airports. I get asked that a lot. But I could have died, or I could have been seriously incapacitated. But thankfully, as you can see, I'm okay. Apart from maybe a mild change in the way I walk. Some people call that a gangster walk from from back in the Philippines. And maybe a weaker right leg. But I even managed to graduate on time. And I attributed that at the time to sports. Prior to my accident, I had rekindled my love of sports, and I was exercising regularly again. I was going to the gym, playing football again. And then after my accident, I found that sports and exercise helped me recover, not just physically, but with football in particular, it helped keep me centered. It helped drive away feelings of depression and anxiety and self-doubt that I was feeling at the time from the accident. And we all know there's a lot of studies that corroborate that support exercise as beneficial to our general health. For me, in my experience, I knew that I felt that sports had saved me from going down this dangerous path. And with that, my first why was born. Soon after I graduated from medical school in 2007, I was on a plane headed to New York to pursue my goal of being a sports doctor. Now, I chose New York, like many do, because I wanted to experience everything that the world had to offer. And of course, if I can make it there, I can make it. Hey, I have no tune whatsoever, sorry. But you know the rest of the song, right? And as being young and ambitious, that was important to me. But the uncertainty that came with that move was dizzying, to say the least. Here I was at the center of the modern world, many call it the center of the modern world, ready to fulfill my dream. But hold on, let's make things a little bit more interesting for you. I had to take 4 more exams on top of the ones I had taken in the Philippines to become a doctor, just so I could train to be a doctor. And then getting into a training program, forget about it. That was a challenge in and of itself. So I had to find another way to achieve my ambition, my goal. I even remember a good friend of mine and me, we went door to door to hospitals begging for opportunities to shadow people. I eventually was able to find work as an orderly, and I used that opportunity, that hospital access, to be able to expand my network in this new city that I had to call home. And fortunately, I was working because I was able to support my wife, who was pregnant at the time with our eldest, and who was taking her master's degree at the same time. Eventually, I did manage to get into a training program in hospital medicine. So, all in all, things were chugging along, and I was sure I was where I wanted to be. Or was I? You see, by this time, I had already started questioning my why. The New York experience was a whirlwind from when we had started. But I realized that the ambition that I had started it with was not what got me through the chaos and the noise. Instead, it was things like seeing my wife completely boss it as a pregnant master's degree student and a first-time mom, and being with her through that part of her life. It was me becoming a father for the first time, and the joy of seeing my son and being involved with him growing up. It was the experience of the love and support of family and friends, as we settled into life in this new city. I wasn't looking at my why the same way anymore, and I knew it, but I didn't know what to do with that knowledge yet. Unfortunately, the journey to that answer would hit me harder than anything ever had. 2014 was the year I got into the sports medicine program that I had always wanted to get into. And it's the same year that we were expecting our second child. So everything was looking up. On April 24th, 2014, our baby boy was born. A healthy baby boy, 2,948 grams. I'll never forget it. And we were all so excited to meet him. After everything, my eldest son, who was 4 at the time, Even got to hold him, got to go to the hospital and visit. And after all the checks were normal, we were ready to go home the next day. On the day of discharge, our son wasn't looking so good. He was a little lethargic. So they took some extra tests to make sure everything was okay. It was then that we found out that for some unknown reason he was in liver and kidney failure. He was brought to the ICU after that, so they could figure out what was going on. And for 5 days, we watched. We saw him, being hooked up to all kinds of different tubes. We saw our son being tested over and over and over again, trying to find out what was wrong. And at the end of 5 days, our son died. Now, we never even made it out of the hospital. And I think a part of us is still there. But later on, after his autopsy, we would find out that he had succumbed to a really rare condition called gestational autoimmune liver disease, which happens in like 4 out of 100,000 pregnancies in the US. It has a 10% survival rate and a recurrence rate of 95%, unless my wife were to undergo intensive treatment for each of her next pregnancies. As all of these events were unfolding before me, the doctor in me knew what was eventually going to happen, was certain of it. But even as the father in me hoped otherwise. I knew it enough that when the monitor showed the changes that I was afraid of, I was the one who told my wife that it was time to say goodbye to our son, and that there was nothing else we could do. All I felt I could do was hold him in my arms until he passed away. Because I didn't want him to go, I wanted him to go feeling loved. So in those final moments, I realized that, I realized what mattered to me most. My purpose, my why was my family. They were my rudder, they were my sail. So knowing my why, I knew I needed to be more present with my family. And my job at the time couldn't allow me to do it. It had a lot of traveling involved. So I decided that I would work closer to home. And as a result, I went from being a pure sports medicine specialist to being a GP and a performing arts doctor to the Broadway, TV, and movie community of New York City, my adopted home. And it was there that I met and was inspired by so many people and their stories, these supremely talented individuals. But they struggled on a daily basis to make ends meet. And yet, despite all that uncertainty around them, they kept doing what they love to do. Be it acting, singing, dancing, or playing an instrument. And it was because they knew their why. And it may not have been the why that they had started their journeys with, but it was still enough to push back on that uncertainty and keep going in the direction that they chose to go. And that's very important. I remember one patient in particular who, when she was much younger, she was telling me the story. She's a stage actress, and when she was younger, she was offered a movie role, which would have probably set her up for life. But she refused the role, and I was like, why would you refuse something like that? And what she told me is that she didn't want her career to be dictated by how much money she could get for her roles. So she knew her why, and she didn't let any potential results or rewards let her waver from her purpose, which is the love of her craft, her acting, And she was happier for it, even though she wasn't as well off. It actually inspired me to take my own leap of faith, and to explore new possibilities of combining the things that I love with the things I was good at, and to do it with my family, to do it in a place where all of us could start anew. So here we are. We're in the Netherlands, NBA, TEDx. Come on, right? I want to leave a few things with you from what I shared with you today. So the first is, you will never, ever be rid of uncertainty. Like a strong wind or a sudden rain shower, it'll come. #Dutch weather. All right? So accept that you can't control it. Accept that you can't control it. Only how you respond to it. Right? So focus less on the uncertainty. Focus less on the uncertainty. And instead, take the time to understand why you do things. Right? And then immerse yourself in what you discover. Second, finding your why is a journey. It's not a destination. Very often we're taught that purpose is rigid, or we confuse it with the results that we want, the what. Kendall Bronk in the Journal of Positive Psychology even said that purpose is a project. It's a project that endures across the lifespan. And that those who develop that sense of purpose actually end up living healthier, happier, even longer lives. So let your whys evolve the way you evolve, right? As an individual, physically, emotionally, intellectually, even morally. Third, you are not alone. I hope that in your journeys, there is a realization that the people around you are also looking for their whys, or they're struggling to live it. Right? The Dalai Lama once said that our sense of well-being grows the more we care about the happiness of others. And when we realize that it's not just us who endure problems in this life, actually increases our determination to overcome our troubles. And I think that's really important in these times, because, let's face it, everything around us is changing, whether we admit it or not. And uncertainty is everywhere. So compassion for everyone's journey, I think, will allow us to all reach our whys together instead of apart. Most of all, I realized on my journey that gratitude for the blessing of the people around me, my wife, my kids, all three of them, my family and my friends, that helped me to refocus my why, despite all of the uncertainties that I've faced. So I hope that your journeys lead you to a place of gratitude as well. Thank you.